Hello, everybody. Welcome to our final AViD event of 2025. Thank you for coming tonight. If any of you have come to prior events, you know that we've already smashed the all-time attendance record by like a lot. We'll give you exact numbers later, but it's been a terrific year and really appreciate your support in coming out. My name is Dave Raymond. I'm the executive director of the Des Moines Public Library Foundation. I'm often asked, why does the library have a foundation? It's essentially because your tax dollars can only go so far. So the tax dollars help cover the books and the buildings and what I call the bodies, so the people who run the library. But all of these programs that the Des Moines Public Library offers, like AViD, summer reading, all the technology initiatives, all the ways that we engage with the community, that all comes primarily from donors and sponsors. So I'm here to kind of help educate you a little bit about that. Also want to make note that AViD is literally only possible because of our sponsors. We have 15 of them this year who have made it possible to bring in these great authors and to create these experiences for you. A few of them are here tonight. If you don't mind, let's give them a quick round of applause for their generosity. You probably know this, tough times for libraries, so we welcome any support that you would like to offer. There is a QR code in the program if you would be interested in donating, or you can certainly go online at dmplfoundation.org. Would welcome any support that you can offer. A little bit of quick housekeeping before we get going tonight. You should have received on your seat an evaluation form or a feedback form. That actually helps us in two ways. One is to get feedback about tonight's event, but also to help us in planning for the future year, as well as reporting back to those organizations that give us grants. So any feedback is helpful, and we really appreciate you filling that out. There's also a QR code on that if you'd rather do that online. I am told that Nikki will graciously sign books tonight. So thank you, Nikki. I'm talking to her as if we're lifelong friends. We just met like 5 minutes ago, but Nikki offered graciously to sign books afterwards. So if you brought a book, please come and meet Nikki and have your book signed. Or Beaverdale Books is here selling her books if you'd like to purchase one. And 10% of your purchase price will help support the Des Moines Public Libraries. And before I get off the stage, I just want to quickly introduce our moderator for tonight, who some of you will recognize. Our moderator tonight is Megan Reuther. She is the host of Hello, Iowa on WHO 13. She joined the WHO News team in 2007 and anchored News at 9 for 5 years. Megan has also won a regional Emmy Award. So you are done listening to me, and now you get to hear from Megan. Thank you all.
Hello, thank you so much for that great introduction. And let's give a round of applause to the Des Moines Public Library Foundation. They do so much. Well, as Dave said, I'm the host of Hello, Iowa on WHO 13. We got to interview Nikki last week. If anyone saw that on her publication day, which is so cool for authors to join us on Pub Day. So thank you so much for doing that. I'm the mom of 3 teens. In fact, I just went to orientation this morning for my oldest teen at Iowa State University. Do we have any Cyclones in here? Ooh, a lot. A lot. I went to the University of Missouri, Columbia. Oh no, we got some Iowa fans. Love them too. Nikki, Iowa State, Iowa, huge rivalry here. That's all you need to know about the state. I went to the University of Missouri, Columbia, which I promise no spoilers for me because I haven't quite finished this book, but I was telling Nikki I loved that Mizzou was mentioned. If you've read it in there, yeah. Anyway, and then I also have a husband, an amazing husband who knows when to get out of my way when I am reading a book. So very supportive. Okay, do we have some other, well, it's mainly women. Do we have some husbands in here that are very supportive, I can tell. Well, it's my pleasure to introduce Nikki Erlick, and I got to spend some time with her. She is just so delightful. You guys are gonna love this conversation today. She's a travel writer, a ghost writer, which I thought was really interesting, and then of course, author of New York Times bestseller, The Measure, which by the way is the 9th book I've read this year. My goal is to read 30 books this year, and this one was my 9th, and guess which one is my 10th? Almost ready. Nikki is also from Rye, New York. She lives in LA now, so had a great flight over here. A little maybe mishap, we might mention, but she's traveled to many countries for work. She's also a National Merit Scholar, which I found to be very, yeah, let's give her a round of applause for that. That's a big deal. She studied comparative literature at Harvard and got a master's in global thought at Columbia, which I got to chat a little bit about that. I think that is very fascinating and probably played a small role maybe in some of her writing. So should we bring her up to the stage and get to the questions? Hello. Okay, we are in business here. Well, Nikki, thanks so much for making the travel here to Des Moines, Iowa. How's your trip been so far?
It's been great. Thank you all for coming out on what is not the most ideal weather night, I think, but I'm really appreciative of everyone being here, and I'm dressed very, very summery with my poppy dress, which, as you mentioned, briefly got lost at the Denver airport, but made its way here just a couple hours before this event, and so I'm very happy.
That's so appropriate, because that would have been hard to find a poppy dress to replace in time, I think.
No, I would have been just all over Des Moines looking for a poppy print anything to wear.
Well, I'm just glad that we don't have a tornado warning, which would have seemed maybe appropriate. I mean, it's in the book, right? So, but thankfully we don't have that, just some storms. Well, I don't know which book to start with. I guess The Poppy Fields, because that's your newest book, what we're all here for. How was your publication day and your book tour so far? This is the end of your book tour. We're giving you a rousing welcome to wrap it up.
It's been so amazing. I mean, so much of being a writer is just being alone. And I write mostly in my bedroom, just solitary. And so then weeks like these are when you actually get to go out and meet people, and book people are the best people. And so, it's just been so much fun. And I'm super happy to be kind of ending here. I think it feels like it's going to be a great place to sort of culminate.
Now, The Measure came out in 2022, so right after the pandemic, and I heard that you started it a little bit before the pandemic. What was it like for your debut novel to be a Read with Jenna book?
I mean, just like dream come true. I started writing the book in like 2018. And as you mentioned, I was a travel writer and was writing and being a travel writer through 2019, through early 2020, and then the pandemic hit. And I lost my job as a travel writer, because who needs a travel writer in March of 2020? And so largely the book was written kind of, in a dark time, a period of like personal unemployment, unsure what was going to happen with my future, unsure if anyone was ever going to read the book other than my mom. And so then for it to kind of end with, being on the Today Show and being the Jenna pick was just like out of my mind, unbelievable.
And so thought-provoking. I think that's why it's been good for book clubs, especially. We mentioned your MA in global thought. You were telling me a little bit what global thought is. I guess explain what that is and maybe how that does play a role in your writing.
Yeah, so it was a program kind of like global studies, but it was a brand new program that I wanted to do right after college. I wasn't like 100% ready to enter the real world, I think. And I had studied comparative literature, so I was reading books from all different countries and different translations, and always loved studying foreign languages. And I've just always kind of loved, thinking about things from a bigger perspective and stepping outside of just what I, as in an American point of view, think about things. And so the program really allowed me to do that. And then when I was writing this book, and I had, for people who've read it, I had these strings arriving for everybody. At some point I was like, well, I think I know how things would play out here in America, but what about everywhere else, and taking that moment to kind of step out and be like, zoom out and think about things from kind of more of a global perspective really brought in the book, I think.
And I think it really gave some pandemic vibes, actually, coming out after the pandemic. Did you all read The Measure? Has everyone read that, or a lot of people? Maybe talked about it in your book clubs? So then a week ago tomorrow, so last Tuesday, The poppy fields came out. How did you get this idea into your mind and onto paper?
So obviously you're forgiven if you have not read it yet because it just came out.
Yeah, let's give a little the speculative fiction and what it is.
Yeah, so similar to my first book, which was some speculative fiction, kind of magical realism, this book is about a scientist who invents a cure for grief. And it's about sort of the people who are seeking out this cure. And we follow a lot of them on a road trip to get to this place called the Poppy Fields, where you can have this treatment for grief. But it requires you to go to sleep for a month-long period of time, at least a month minimum. And then when you wake up, you are healed from from the pain of sort of loss and heartbreak that brought you there. But there are some potential side effects. It's not an easy choice. And the idea came from me right after the measure came out, actually, during a time of grief in my own life, a loss in my family, and just feeling overwhelmed by the desire to go to sleep. Like that felt like the one sort of escape from the pain was just every time I went to bed, and I just wanted to go to sleep and wake up on the other side. And I was thinking about that, and I ended up looking at a poster on my bedroom wall, which was a scene of Dorothy asleep in the poppy fields in The Wizard of Oz. And I was just like, huh, maybe there's something here, like maybe there is a place that I can make up called the poppy fields where people can do this thing that I want to do right now. And what would that look like? And that was the spark of the book. And then sort of because of that inspiration, there are sort of allusions to Wizard of Oz throughout the story, as you mentioned with the tornado in the beginning.
And in Kansas.
Kansas, yes, a tornado at the Kansas City airport, which sort of strands the people who end up then having to take this road trip. And so I felt the need to put in the acknowledgments that I had a very pleasant time at the Kansas City airport. Nothing bad happened to me there. I was like, I flew in and out, no issues, but there are some issues in the book.
You mentioned the grief, and I was wondering, because when you write about grief in here, anyone who's been through grief, my mom died when I was in high school, and my dad when I was in my 20s, so I felt this reading when you meant, and I said no spoilers, but I don't think this is a spoiler because it's about grief. But the painting with Icarus and someone saying it felt like I'm drowning over in this corner and the rest of the world is just moving on. Did you read or talk to a lot of people going through grief to really put yourself into those shoes?
Yeah, I mean, I've certainly pulled on kind of my experience, my family's experience, friends that I've sort of seen go through. And I did some research. I talked to a professional grief counselor and wanted to kind of get the, because I am obviously not a therapist, I'm not a doctor, and I wanted to get that sort of clinical point of view of someone who has watched hundreds and hundreds of people move through, through grief. And as you said, it's that overwhelming feeling of, it's so universal. To be human means at some point to lose someone you love. But when you're going through it, you just feel so lonely. And so like the rest of the world is moving on without you. And so that was part of the impetus for the invention in this book, which is, well, come sleep here and we'll help you, we'll help you move on. We'll help you catch up with the rest of the world. And that's sort of the allure of this treatment. But then the question is, what are you willing to sacrifice in order to have that treatment?
When we talked last week, you talked a little bit about research that's actually going on. Now this, feels 5 minutes from now. It's speculative, but talk to us about that.
Yeah, so I had the idea for, this treatment for grief, and it's mentioned like a little, like the science is sort of vague in the book because it's not real. And I've had readers be like, can you give me what's the exact science or the exact treatment? And I was like, if it existed, it would exist, like this is fiction. But as I was doing the research for the book, realized that, this kind of research is well underway in sort of the pharmaceutical industry, the question of like a pill for grief. And so I hope that kind of the questions that are spurred by this book will be things that people start talking about, because maybe 5-10 years from now, it's going to be something that we actually need to, is this something we want to invest in as a society? And what are the potential consequences of the pros and benefits of it?
I feel like you maybe have at least one Easter egg in this book leading back to your first book. Do you like to drop those in? I know you just have 2 books, but
I just thought it would be fun to do because I assumed most people who come to the poppy fields have read The Measure first. Maybe not, but and so I was like, maybe I'll put in one little like nod to The Measure that if you haven't read The Measure, hopefully it won't like disrupt your reading experience, but if you have, you'll sort of recognize it. And obviously there are other writers who have full-on like characters that are crossing over between stories and, much more of a interconnected world. And I don't know if I would need to like be keeping notes somewhere to be able to pull that off. I think maybe just a little Easter egg is sort of where I'm playing at.
now, which by the way, I think I forgot this very important announcement at the beginning. You all had cards on your seats. If you have questions, did everyone find those and bring the questions in? I totally almost forgot about that. But yes, Kelly and Aaron are there. They can grab your questions. What made me think of that is these lovely ladies in the front row were chatting with you, and they had a question about your writing process. Do you ever come up, like, how do you plan it out? Do you ever come up with dead ends? Is this all outlined? I guess, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so with The Measure, it just kind of was an idea one day but I was thinking about sort of big questions around like fate and destiny, and was thinking about the ancient Greek mythology around fate. And so they believed in these sort of strings of fate that the fates would weave for all people. And so my thought was just, what if these strings were real? And what if I gave them to people? And then that idea sort of came first, and then who are the characters that I want to see in this new world, and what kind of like dilemmas do I want to see people exploring as characters came after that. And with the poppy fields too, as I said, like the idea came first, this place of the poppy fields, and then, okay, well now who are the characters in this book? And so it's gonna be who invented the poppy fields and who's sleeping there and why. And so it's usually a kernel of an idea first and then everything else. And The Measure I did not outline at all, which I regretted a lot. So then the poppy fields I really tried to outline as a way to kind of overcorrect for what happened with The Measure when things got a little messy.
But you had longer to write The Measure, it seemed like, because did you really have a deadline? You were just writing?
I was just writing in my parents' attic in like lockdown. And yeah, no deadlines, just no sense of, is this even gonna be a career for me? Just kind of, I just knew that I'd always loved books, and I always wanted at some point to try to write a book. And then the pandemic was the perfect opportunity because there was nothing else for me to do. And so with the poppy fields, it was, I didn't have a deadline in the sense that like I had a team then, the same team who wrote on The Measure, and they were sort of waiting for the book, but they weren't like, it needs to be delivered by this point. Luckily, I am not on a book a year rotation like some of my fellow authors who I truly cannot imagine how they do it and like still sleep at night.
Maybe we're jumping ahead, but do you have another book in the works?
I wish I could say yes, but I'm sort of in that, do you ever hit dead ends? Yeah, I do hit dead ends moment. And I'm hitting a few dead ends at the moment, and I'm sort of taking time off now to just like focus on this new book, and then I'll get back to the writing. Maybe, I don't know, maybe tomorrow. Maybe tomorrow. Now that the tour is over, I have literally no excuse. So
okay, well, we'll all encourage you because we love her books, right? We want her to keep her, no pressure. I would imagine, though, as an author, that has to be difficult, especially your debut novel to be a bestseller right off the bat. And then, like, how do you top it? And you have, and all these unique ideas that most of us couldn't even dream of, but we're so thankful that you did.
I just feel so like lucky and grateful that this is my career right now. And I think with writing the first book, I realized the things that I like to write about, and so I like this sort of, as you said, like it feels like our world, but it's our world with like a little twist, or it's our world 5 minutes from now or something. And I like writing kind of ensemble casts of many different characters and coming at a big sort of question or dilemma from many different people's perspectives. And so I felt like I took a lot of that to then write the poppy fields and realize what I liked. But I don't know if it'll always be like that. I hope to keep writing books, and so we'll see see what comes out next.
So writing the poppy field, speaking of characters, did you have in mind, obviously PJ would be Toto, I suppose, but did you have in mind like the different characters match up with people in The Wizard of Oz?
I decided pretty early on that it was not going to be like a one-for-one like retelling of The Wizard of Oz, and just kind of, it was going to be four strangers who get thrown together, four strangers and a little dog, PJ, who are kind of on their way to like meet the wizard, in the sense of like, who's this mysterious scientist who created the poppy fields. But it's not like a one-to-one who is every character, because I wanted a little more freedom than that. and instead it's people who are all experiencing a different type of loss or heartbreak in their life. They're at a different stage in their healing process, things like that.
Well, it's so creative. With the writing process, you went to Harvard to study comparative literature. So were you writing novels? Were you preparing to write novels in that, or were you just studying other people's books?
I was never, The Measure was the first novel I attempted to write. And I know that I'm very, very lucky that I don't have that like trash bin of many failed manuscripts. But I just was always reading, and like in comparative literature, I was just always reading. And I think reading is the best training for writing, because you see everything that's out there, you get inspired. And I initially was training more to be a journalist, and ended up in travel journalism, which kept me writing too, which is great. That's the best practice. But no, I just have my trash bin of like short stories and poems that I wrote when I was 10, which, oh my God.
We all have those, right?
Right. I was like, oh, they're like pretentious in a way that only a 10-year-old can be so pretentious. Like, oh my God, like so much about a tree, Like.
Speaking of, you mentioned training for journalism. Nikki told me you had an internship on a morning show. Is that right?
Oh, I was saying that like at one point my dream career was your career of being on air as a TV reporter and interviewer, and then I shadowed someone who has your job and realized I cannot do this job. It's like I cannot get up at 4 a.m.
Well, you have my dream. We should switch one day for a day. Yeah. That'd be fun. Okay, travel. You mentioned travel writing. There's a lot of travel in the poppy fields. How much of that did you lean on for this journey? Did you make the journey from the Kansas City airport all the way to California?
Yeah, I think because of, again, that sort of Wizard of Oz illusion, I was like, maybe this can be a journey narrative in the same way. And also using the idea of a journey, as a metaphor also for grief and healing, and the fact that it is it's a windy road, there's detours, everybody drives at their own pace, everybody sort of heals at their own pace. And so I thought, okay, this road trip makes sense for the structure of the story and also the themes of the story. And so I thought, okay, if it is the Wizard of Oz, we have to start in, some around Kansas, and then sort of make our way out from there. And I ended up putting the poppy fields, this sort of treatment center, in the California desert, because I want it to be very, very remote, a place, because this place is controversial, it's sort of mysterious, so it has to be kind of inaccessible. It's out in the desert. And then I was like, okay, well, how do my characters get from there to there? I guess I'll go do it. And so I flew into the Kansas City airport, rented a car, and drove west with my sister. She came with me, thank goodness. Otherwise, I would have probably been like stranded, on day one somewhere. And it was fantastic. We did it slowly. I can't drive more than 4 hours in a day. That was my rule. So it was pretty slow. And we just got to like soak in all the landscapes, and just, going from Kansas and Oklahoma to then like New Mexico and desert area. It was incredible.
Yeah, that had to be full of fun memories too, with your sister doing that and really getting to see the scenery and see the sights. Did any of those things that you maybe stopped by make it into the book? Any of the pit stops?
Yeah, there's a couple scenes set in Sedona on a hike there, because they have the famous sort of vortexes that people hike to, which I did one of those hikes, and it inspired sort of a moment of kind of like healing and enlightenment in nature for one of the characters here. And I have a fear of heights, and so when we were in New Mexico, we were like, oh, they're like known for hot air balloon rides in New Mexico. Maybe this is like the moment that I confront my fear of heights and I go up in that hot air balloon. And we did that. And then of course it dawned on me the hot air balloon is also a Wizard of Oz. I was like, that needs to go in too now. And so there is now a hot air balloon ride scene in the book. And it was just so fun to like revisit those experiences that I had through the eyes of a character instead. And like, this is maybe how I felt up in the hot air balloon, but how would this character feel up in there? And so that ended up in there as well, which is sort of just fun memories, scary but fun.
In addition, oh, by the way, Kelly is going by. If you have any more questions, we're about to ask some of your questions. Now, before we get to that, or maybe we should save this for the end, but my burning question is, because you write through so many different people's perspectives, would you, in the measure, would you open your box? Should I have saved it for the end?
No. I was like, should we do a show of hands? Who would open their box?
Oh yeah, who would open their box? You're like, you're not sure.
A half hand? Yeah. Okay. Cheating. That was like maybe a little under 50%.
Yeah, I would say so who would not? Would anyone? Definitely not. Yeah, I've fallen.
That feels this is an interesting crowd because obviously I've seen this answer in a lot of crowds and normally it's much more 50-50. This is a crowd of much more people who do not want to look. Which you can all analyze that now. But I would try not to look. I would try not. I'm super lucky that I'm like living my dream right now, and so I wouldn't have to make any big changes, I don't think, depending on what I saw in that box. I would try not to look, but I'd keep it in my house. It can't get like thrown in a river. Like I gotta keep it close.
Just to have it, yeah.
To have it, yeah.
That's how I would be too, although it would be really hard not to. That would you tackle?
Yes.
And yeah.
Yes.
Okay, would you go to the poppy fields?
It's a tougher choice for me that maybe I would go to the poppy fields, but because of the side effect in the book that there is this potential risk of going to sleep, and I don't know if I could handle that, but I'm very tempted. I'm very tempted.
Okay, what about you all? Would you go to and I don't know if everyone's right. No, it's like no.
You have to read the book first.
Yeah, that's right. You got to read it. Thank you, Erin. Okay, we got a lot of questions, so let's get to that. Okay, this is a good one since we're at the library. What is your library story? Like growing up, did you go? Did you use it for research? Did you write in a library?
Yeah, my parents would definitely take me growing up. My parents were always super, super supportive of my reading habits and gave me a lot of books and took me to the library, which I appreciate. I can't write in the library, but I can't write anywhere other than my house. Like I need total silence. Like the dream obviously is writing in like a cafe in Paris or something, and that couldn't happen. It's too loud. Even a library is a little too loud for me because there's just people around. But then, yeah, just growing up going to the library, and now as a writer, like one of my hometown event for the measure, like the very first thing was at my hometown library. They hosted it. A bunch of my teachers came from, as far back as 3rd grade. It was like, just teachers and librarians are like the best people. And they all turned out for me, which is so nice. And so I feel like, yeah, it felt like such a full circle moment for me to be kind of launching the measure at the library that I went to growing up.
Oh, that's beautiful. And how big was your hometown, Rye, New York?
Maybe like 20,000 people.
Okay, so a good size.
Yeah, it was like a big suburb. I think. Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. Where are you going to travel next? Back home, I guess.
Yeah, I was like home. I've been in New York, California, South Carolina, now here. And then I'm going to a festival in Michigan. So I think Michigan is my next state after home, which is good because I'm trying to go to all 50 states, and that one will be like number 28 or something for me.
Oh, okay. In Michigan, that's perfect in the summertime.
Oh yeah, I'm excited.
I think, yeah. Okay, how do you scope out or identify the cast of characters for big, broad works of speculative fiction with global plot reach significance? That's a good question.
Yeah, that's a layered question. That's impressive. I think both of these books centered around like a question sort of, and I don't want to say like an ethical dilemma, but just like a sort of philosophical dilemma or a sort of challenge that you could come at from many different perspectives. And so I just thought whose stories are kind of most interesting here. Like for the measure, with these strings, it was like, a couple who are in a relationship and they get strings of different lengths, and what do they do now? Then a politician, a doctor, people in the healthcare world how they're thrown by the strings, things like that. I let the characters kind of grow out of the premise in terms of who would be most interesting, and similar for the poppy fields. And wanting to make sure that, I'm never going to be able to touch every possible perspective and every possible angle towards these questions, but trying to get enough of them that there's always somebody who a reader can kind of see themselves in, even if it's not the main character, maybe it's a secondary character.
With that, is it challenging to stick with those voices for that character, to like switch back and forth?
I always write in different characters on different days. And so, the measure, when I first wrote it, had 10 narrators. I think in the end there's 8 now, because my editor was like, this is too many. Just like, I already see like readers send me on Instagram, like, here's my paper where I was keeping track of who all the people are. So thank goodness I didn't make them do 10. And so, but it was like every day. Today I would only write as in Ben's voice, or today I'm only writing in the writing stage. When you're editing, I can kind of go around, but I tried to only write as one person. I think that's the cleanest way for my brain.
Was it easier for the poppy fields having fewer narrators?
It was a little bit easier, yeah, and
Well,
like they're together more quickly than they are in the measure.
Yeah, and I guess they weren't even like separate as far as narration. It was more,
Yes.
It's like a different style. I don't know
Yes.
the word for that.
It's kind of like, it's like dipping in and out of all of their perspectives in the same scene. So yeah, it wasn't as sort of siloed as the measure was.
I liked that. Okay, where did Sky's character come from, since she didn't want to go to the field? Oh yeah, why did you want to get her perspective in there?
Someone has already read the book, because Sky comes in Sky comes in kind of early, I guess.
I see her yeah.
Yeah, she was meant to be, because she's someone who's not actively going through a loss the way that some of the other characters are, or most of the other characters. And so I wanted somebody who came in as kind of a ray of light among people who are maybe going through something a little bit heavier. And so she's 18, she's hitchhiking out on the road. And because I was like, this is a road trip. Who else do you encounter on a road trip? Maybe the 18-year-old hitchhiker. And so she's there as kind of the, sort of the breath of fresh air. And she brings kind of something to every character in a different way they didn't know they needed, in the way that only kind of, like when children just like say something, she's 18, but when children just like say something and you're like, wow, like that is so profound for just like a young child just saying something, that kind of we as like more jaded adults don't always, see the world through their eyes.
As a mom of an 18-year-old, though, I'm like, okay, don't get any ideas. Okay, when writing the measure, did you ever consider revealing the origin of the boxes, and why did you decide not to reveal that?
Yeah, I decided really early on to not get into kind of where the boxes came from, because I feel like that would have made it then like a sort of true like fantasy sci-fi story, and it more would have been about like who created these boxes and how and why. And I wanted it to be a really like grounded human story, and I was much more interested in what we do with these strings and what it shows about who we are as people and how we interact in a society, as opposed to kind of sort of creating a mythology around these strings. But I didn't realize it would get people riled up the way it has, that they didn't get that answer. People, there's always like at a bigger Q&A, people say, where do the boxes come from? And I say, there is no answer. And then I get to the signing line and the person's like, okay, but like really where'd the boxes come from? They're like, I know you didn't want to tell the group, but like you can tell me. And I was like, really? Like there's no answer.
And I feel like there's a little bit of I think some people could read a little religious into that. And you did weave throughout, I think, both books, different religious not views, but you mentioned different religions. Did you research a lot of, different religions?
Yeah, a little bit, and certain just like people in my life of different religions. But I feel like, with both of these books, there is some sort of there's a moral, ethical element to it. And so, of course, many people are going to, bring their faith to that question and that dilemma. And so I wanted to explore that. I think more so in the measure, because there's an interpretation that the boxes are sent by God. There's an interpretation that they're sent by aliens. There's an interpretation that it's all a metaphor. It's all an allegory. And I I think that they're all pretty valid. Maybe the aliens, I don't know, not as valid, but
It's fiction. Which character was the easiest and/or most challenging for you to develop?
With the characters in the measure, I think like writing characters who I disagree with is, a little bit harder. People whose decisions I'm just like, oh God, I would never make that decision, or I just, but the task of the writer is to step into their perspective and to try to empathize with them and see where they're coming from. And so that's hard, as opposed to writing a character who feels like, oh, we are on the same page, like they're thinking like me, that flows a little bit more easily. But yeah, there's no specific people who necessarily stand out, but certainly the people who are, the military cadets and the ER doctor, things that are just not my career, obviously required research as to what it is to be that.
And I think it's kind of on the opposite end of the reader. I think we appreciate reading characters that challenge our views and that we don't agree with, because it's easier to read someone that you agree with.
Yeah, definitely. And that's that's like why we should read in the first place, just to open our minds to so many different perspectives.
The measure has many themes that seem extra relevant in our current times. I would agree. What are the best, most positive themes you see reflected today from the book?
Oh, that's nice. I think, like the measure explores the way that something kind of chaotic and mysterious and inexplicable, such as the pandemic, such as the strings arriving, can either be a force for tearing people apart and a force for division, or a force for bringing people together and a force for good, and a force for sort of new communities to come together. And I think with grief in the poppy fields, the same thing. It's, grief can either be something that we allow to sort of isolate us and to be a thing that we like avoid the people in our lives who are going through grief because we're uncomfortable and we don't know what to say, or it can be a moment where we realize like, no, these are experiences that bring all of us together, that we all share at some point, and they are part of what makes us human. And so I think I see that every day. I see anything that happens on the news, it can either become a force for pulling people apart or pulling people together. And so the people who choose to come together, are the ones that I admire.
That's a great answer. And I'm wondering, as a follow-up, you mentioned Instagram, things like that. Do you hear from a lot of people, and is it mostly positive, or do you hear some negative too?
Yeah, it's the measure is now like translated in a lot of different languages, and so I'll get messages that are in another language, and there's always that brief moment before I put it into Google Translate, like, is this gonna be nice? But it's the people, I hear from readers all the time, which it still stuns me. Like, this book has been out for 3 years, and every day I'm still getting, messages on Instagram and emails and things about something in the book that resonated with people, and people who are not afraid to share very, very deep personal stories with me. It's such an honor to just kind of just be there to listen. And yeah, no one has ever said anything mean to me directly. On Goodreads probably. But the messages that I get are just so moving. And I feel like, I guess because I was, coming of age as a reader before social media, like I never read a book and then thought, how can I get in touch with the author? Because it just didn't seem like a possibility. Yeah. And the fact that it now is a possibility is so cool.
It is cool. And that you read them too. That's a great.
I try to. Like this week I'm probably missing some, unfortunately, but I really try to, especially when I open it up and it's a long, heartfelt note. Like, I definitely want to take the time to respond.
Yeah. So how do you respond in other languages? Just put it in Google Translate?
Yeah, I usually just say, I now like say thank you in many different languages, or I do like heart, universal emoji.
There you go. Yeah, thank goodness for emojis now,
yes,
right?
Yes.
Okay, discuss the steps taken from writing in your parents' attic, which that's a fun tidbit, to getting it actually published.
Steps were a lot of good luck and good timing. I wrote the whole manuscript. For anyone who wants to be a novelist, for fiction, you have to write an entire manuscript before you can go try to get an agent. For nonfiction, you just have to have like an idea and like a proposal. So jealous. So I wrote the whole manuscript. My mom and my sister read it many, many times and edited for me. I'm so lucky that the two of them had the patience for that, and also that they're really good readers. And then they were the ones who said, like, there might be something here, you know, like maybe you should see if you can try to get an agent and see if something happens. And so I researched like how to get an agent and emailed a bunch of people and got very lucky that I found an incredible agent, an incredible partner, and she helped me clean up the mess that was part of the manuscript. She inherited a version of the measure that also jumped around in chronology, which, like, can you imagine 10 narrators and jumping around in chronology? Like, I don't know how she understood it. And so we cleaned it up and got it to a publisher.
How do you handle the editing process? I think that would be so stressful.
It's definitely stressful when you get kind of like the note from the editor that's like, here's all the things that are wrong with this. And they don't necessarily say how to fix it, you know, it's just here's what's wrong. And then you take a little time to digest it. But I am like, I had the same editor on both of these books, and we work really wonderfully together. And so you know, I know it's not perfect. I'm only on book 2, and probably if I write 20 books, they're still not going to be perfect right out the gate. And so I welcome someone who's going to try to make it better.
Do you just not take it personally? Like, you know, hey, someone saw this. It's a good book. I just, need to make these changes.
Yeah, I don't think you can take that part personally, because it's, you know.
I would. I would have a hard time.
I don't take the editing with my publisher personally. I take reviews more personally, which is why my team, like, yanked me off of Goodreads like very fast.
Yeah, because they've all written books, the people on Goodreads.
It's just, I mean, and like of course, I mean, I don't love every book I read. No one should not everyone in the world's gonna love these books, but I do take it very personally. And like, it'll keep me up at night that somebody said that they just like didn't like this character.
Well, how did this become a career then after, you know, finding your publisher, doing all of that, and now two great books?
I know, I mean, after the first book, you know, we realized it was going to get published, then I sort of dedicated it as my full time, trying to get it into that shape. And then luckily the idea for the next book came right after the first book got published. And so I was like, oh, this, like, for as long as I can, like, this being my full-time career is just like pinch me every morning kind of situation.
How has it all, the Read with Jenna community, impacted your experience as an author, whether in terms of your writing process, readership, or how you connect with your audience?
Yeah, it's such an incredible community, and certainly, you know, the measure would not have had the reach that it has had without that community. Yeah, I mean, and like in terms of just meeting other authors too, like every year there's like an anniversary reunion for all the Read with Jenna authors.
Oh, really?
It's super cool. It's always like late February in New York, and I'm coming now from Southern California, and so I'm like, oh, guys, it's so cold.
We do this in the fall.
Right, I know, it's like any other time of year. But it's, you know, it's so cool. And like, I got to meet like Jamie Ford, who's there, was an incredible author, and then, you know, he then was so generous and gave me a blurb for the cover of this book. Like, it just, the relationships that you make are so special, and the readers in that community are really, really devoted. Like, anything that she tells them to read, they will read. And I mean, I obviously am biased, but I think she has excellent taste.
She does.
I love all of her other picks too. I think Kevin Wilson, who is just here, obviously I think Nothing to See Here was a Read with Jenna pick in the past. And I think that's how I discovered that book too. And now he's like one of my favorite authors, and I'm so jealous you guys all got to see him and I haven't.
So you guys become a club, a real book club.
A genuine club, yeah.
That's right. How many hours do you write per day when you're writing? That's a good question.
If it's a good day, could be like 12, 14 hours.
Oh, wow.
And I like skip meals, and I'm just like in the zone. But then it really evens out, because then the next day, writer's block, 0 hours, nothing. And so it's a crazy pendulum of like super intense, super long days, and then days of just like head banging.
Do you give yourself deadlines like, I need to write this many words by this time?
For a week, I did 500 words a day, and they were all so bad, all bad. And so that didn't last very long, and I was like, it just has to be, if it's flowing, it's flowing, and I'll really lean into it. You know, I'll spend the whole weekend, and And if it's not, then I'm not going to force it. And the deadlines in writing are so long. Like back when I had like I worked in an office, the deadline was like, get this to me by lunch. And then with the book, it's like, get this to me in a year. And it's like, how do I budget my time for a year,
You can't really cram that in overnight.
No. Even when I have a whole year, somehow the final week is still like total chaos, total rushing at the end. And I'm like, I had so much time to not do this.
Do you still feel as hopeful, positive about humanity as you did when you wrote The Measure? A lot's gone on since 2018.
Yeah. I guess I finished The Measure in 2021. And so it was like pretty, deep in the pandemic, pretty difficult time. And I just knew that and the book was going to come out then in summer of 2022, which felt like a world away. I had no idea what the world was going to look like. None of us did. But I just was like, I want the book to feel like it ends on a note of hope, because hope will never go out of style, no matter if the world is going super well or sort of the opposite, you can always have hope. And I feel like I have held on to that. And the poppy fields too, it goes to some, heavier places with people going through loss, but I wanted to also end on a note of hope and a note that, that there is that sort of light at the end of the tunnel.
Okay, these are some questions about The Measure. Is there another perspective you would add if you wrote the book now? I guess you took out two of them.
Yeah. I think they just sort of receded to the background and weren't like main characters anymore. I think I would love to spend like a year in another country and write The Measure like in that other country. But I feel like I would need to really spend time there and really live there to know how this would unfold the way that I felt like I had a decent handle of how I thought it would unfold here in the US. And I think having, like in a country that feels very, very different from here or something, if I could go live there and write it there, that would be interesting.
Do you think you could do a sequel?
I would never say never. I think a lot of the characters are no longer with us at the end of The Measure.
That's true.
I mean,
a different perspective.
You all said you read it, so. But it ends on kind of like the next generation, and I think maybe picking up The Measure with the future generation could be interesting.
In another country, maybe they all.
The children all move to some other country and start over there.
See, we figured out your next book for you.
There we go.
Who is your favorite author, and how many books do you read in a week or a month? Ooh, that's a good question.
A week? How many books do you guys read in a week? Like that many?
Depends on the week.
Yeah. Wow. I don't know. I was like, because now I get to, I'm reading the books that I'm reading, and then I also get like advanced copies of books that are like, I feel fancy, and I get like a sneak peek at something that hasn't come out yet. And so I'm reading those too. But my favorite author maybe is a tie between Anne Patchett and Emily St. John Mandel, I think. Yes, fantastic authors. Emily St. John Mandel, obviously a little more in the sci-fi realm, and Anne Patchett just can write like literally anything, and it sounds beautiful and is always a completely different story, and I just super, super admire that.
When you read these advanced copy books, do you write the blurbs like people do for you on the back cover?
Yes, and when I got my first request to like be the person giving a blurb, I was like, what? Like, this person wants my name on their book to like maybe persuade someone? Like, that's wild. And I spent so long writing that blurb, like
longer than maybe a chapter even?
Yeah, I was like, this has to be so well written. And I think, I don't know how other authors do it, but like, I always read the entire book before I decide if I'm going to blurb it, and I'm never just going to be like, oh, here's the first page, like, and I'll just throw it in. Like, no, that's not fair. Like, somebody spent a really long time on the book. I'm going to read the whole thing, and I'm going to try to be really thoughtful about it. But I need to maybe make it slightly lower stakes every time I try to write just one sentence.
What books in the speculative fiction genre inspire you? Are there a lot of speculative fiction?
Yeah, it's like an interesting genre. I call my book speculative fiction. A lot of people are like, I don't know what that word is. And I was like, did I make it up? But I think like it's not as full-blown dark as like dystopian. Like The Handmaid's Tale is maybe like sort of speculative, but more dystopian. But that certainly was a big inspiration for me, as a younger reader. And then, I think speculative to me is anything where like there's slight twists on reality. Honestly, even like Nothing to See Here is kind of speculative because those kids aren't, those kids are catching fire. I think like The Power by Naomi Alderman is a really cool example. And the short stories of Ted Chiang are some really great, really like philosophical, big like what if questions that, in a similar vein to me tackling kind of like a what if question in these novels, he does in a short story, which I can't even imagine like writing a short story. Like I feel like how do you get all of everything you want to say in just such a short period? I don't know. It's amazing.
Are you basing the theme of grief on a personal experience you want to share? I know you mentioned family.
Yeah, no, it was like the loss of my grandmother, who I was super, super close with, who the measure was dedicated to, and she passed away right after it came out. So she got to see it come out, which is really, really special. And and she's like the one who taught me how to read and like gave me my love of books, and also my love of travel. She's just an incredible traveler, incredible trip planner, and so like this book is like an homage to her in so many ways. So I like to think that she, is looking at it somewhere.
Did she inspire Granny May?
A little, yeah. There's a grandmother character in the book. A little bit, because like she is also a big reader and she works at a library. And so I think a little bit of that dynamic there, but I did not call my grandmother Granny.
Okay, would you consider writing a part 2 where you interject the idea of hope, the possibility that the string could be changed? And this is asking as a stage 4 cancer survivor. Thank you. So thank you for submitting that question. Also, this person loved the book.
Thank you. Thank you. That was also an early on decision of like, where do the strings come from? Me deciding I wasn't going down that path. And then, can you change the strings? It was a really tough decision, and I wrote some other potential versions in which like maybe there was a possibility of that, but it felt like just the people in my life who have had short strings, like there was nothing that they could have done. They didn't invite that on themselves, obviously, and there was nothing that they could have done to have changed that. And so I didn't want to create this kind of false sense of hope or false sense of just fate in the book, maybe. And so more what was important to me was showing that even the people with the shortest strings in the books leave the biggest impacts, and that like it doesn't matter how long the string is, that the people with the shortest strings in the book are the ones whose kind of like actions reverberate the most, and whose legacy is living on far beyond them, and that to me was my way of hopefully some sort of tribute to the people in my life who have had shorter strings.
And gives hope, for sure. How far in advance do you know, or did you know you were a Read with Jenna pick? Was it a hard secret to keep?
It was definitely several months in advance.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a bit, and it was a super hard secret to keep. I told my mom and my sister because we like grew up watching the Today Show together, like Hoda and Kathy Lee, and then Hoda and Jenna, and so they were super excited. And we all decided together that we couldn't tell my dad because he couldn't keep the secret. It was just like, oh, I want to tell him, but he can't know. And so then he at least had the surprise of like seeing it on the TV live.
That's how he learned?
That morning. It makes me feel terrible, and
I think that's great.
He honestly made me feel a little terrible at first when he realized like the rest of the family all knew. But then 2 weeks later, he just like comes up to me and is like, I think you're right, and I would have spoiled it, and so I think you made the right decision.
What's something about the publishing industry that surprised you, that maybe we'd all be surprised about?
How long it takes? Like, I remember telling my friends when we, when we sold the measure to HarperCollins and they were going to publish it, and my friends were like, "Oh my God! Like next month we're going to the bookstore. This is so exciting!" And I was like, "Actually, it's like 20 months." It's it's a long, long process, especially when you're a first-time author and like we were like, we need a long runway for marketing and publicity because nobody knows who you are. And it just, the village that goes into making a book too, like that all of a sudden it was like, here's cover designs and here's audio narrators and here's, just so many elements that I think I just didn't even think about. I was just like, no, the book just lands on my lap one day and there it is. But it's actually like a year and a half of dozens and dozens of people putting so much work behind it.
Once you're done writing the book though, like, are you pretty much, okay, I'm chilling now, or do you have a lot to do?
There's a little bit, like I get then, they're like, here's the preliminary cover design, do you have any thoughts? Here who are we thinking of for the audiobook, things like that. But once my editor's like, pencils down, like it cannot be edited anymore, the pages are locked, then I'm just like, well, I never look at the book ever again. Like I haven't read The Measure since early 2021. Wow. And sometimes, people will like, post a photo of a quote on the book on Instagram, and I'm like, what is that? Who wrote that? Like, I was like, is that me? And because it's been so long since I've read it, and honestly, I'm worried someone's gonna ask me like a hyper-specific question, and I'm just gonna be like blank. And so the Poppy Fields 2 now, I guess it's been like probably over a year since I've read that. If I read it again now, I'm just gonna be agonizing over like, why is that comma there? Or like, why didn't I use a different word? I have to kind of step away and never look again.
Just leave it there.
Just leave it as it is. It can't be changed, so that's that.
This is a good question. Have you ever talked with book clubs about your book?
Oh, hundreds of book clubs, all over the country, foreign book clubs. I'm Zooming with book clubs all the time. If you're in a book club and you want to Zoom with me, just DM me. We'll make it happen.
Really?
Oh yeah. Oh, all the time. I'm Zooming all the time. I love book clubs. Yeah, they're like the reason that The Measure sort of has spread by word of mouth just from book clubs, really. And yeah, my editor once told me that she like joined a Zoom book club before they knew she was on, and they were like really bashing the book. And she was like, "Ooh, I'm here," and that has never happened to me. But no, I find it's amazing. I think like the first few times I was so nervous, and now it's just like fun. Like, because obviously I'm sure a lot of you are in book clubs. Like, book clubs are so much fun. But usually if I'm coming onto Zoom, everyone has read the book at least. I know sometimes book clubs can just be more social, but they all have at least read the book.
That's what everyone says, but our book club, like, we read the books, or there was one time I didn't. I thought I was going to get kicked out.
Yeah, no, I think if you're a book club that's like contacting the author to do a Zoom, like you are a serious book club. And most of these people have been book clubs for, sometimes I'm on Zoom and they're like, this is our 40th year as a book club. And I'm like, that's incredible. Like, what is the secret here? And it's like, they're on Zoom now because everybody's moved over the last 4 decades and stuff, but it's so special.
Well, everyone had so many great questions. Are there any takeaways or anything you want us to leave with tonight, or you want readers to leave with once they close that last page and they're done with the book?
Oh gosh. I think for me, like writing and reading are just about opening up your mind and learning to empathize with other characters who maybe are going through something that you haven't gone through, or making a decision you might not have made, but just kind of approaching it with curiosity and with compassion and I think closing the book and maybe returning to your world and the people around you, the strangers that sort of cross our paths every day, with the same kind of curiosity and compassion. I think that would be nice.
I think that's a beautiful message, and something I know I took away from The Measure. I can't wait to finish the Poppy Fields, like 100 more pages, not even 100. So thank you so much for being here at the Des Moines Public Library. Is there anything we also can do to support our libraries and support authors like you?
Oh my God, I guess just keep reading. I think, I think like people often ask, are authors like competitive with each other and, things like that. And it's like, not at all, because I think anytime somebody reads a book and loves it, it's just gonna make them go buy another book or take another book out of the library because they're, rediscovering that kind of joy of reading. And so And if you love a book, pass it on. Tell your family, your friend, and give them your copy and like write notes to each other or something. I think just spread the love.
Nikki Erlick, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nikki, and thank you all for all the great questions. I think Nikki's gonna go, Erin, over there and sign books. And seriously, if you don't have a copy, I mean, look how beautiful this book is in the cover, ooh and ah.